This is Brian Niccol, the CEO of Starbucks. Recently, Mr. Niccol spoke to the Wall Street Journal about how American consumers' outlook on the economy is affecting sales at Starbucks.
So what we're seeing is people, they want to have a special experience. And regardless of what your income level is, in some cases, a $9 experience does feel like you're splurging. And then what that means is we have to make it worthwhile, right? And then in other cases, people believe, well, this is a really affordable premium experience because they're saying like, well, it's less than $10 and I get a really premium experience. So regardless of where you're stationed in those income cohorts, we want to make that experience worth your while.
And the media, always eager to feign outrage on behalf of the working class, immediately pounced, claiming that an out-of-touch millionaire CEO thinks that you should be thrilled to pay $9 for a cup of coffee. As Americans struggle with the price of gas and groceries, Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol made the case for a $9 cup of coffee. $9 for a Starbucks is an affordable luxury? CEOs need to wake up and smell the coffee. The head honcho thinks splurging nearly $10 on a beverage during a cost of living crisis is fine for a special experience.
I love a good latte just as much, if not more, than the next person. But the prices at Starbucks are out of hand.
The CEO of Starbucks said that a $9 coffee is really affordable.
$9 per cup of burnt coffee.
But there's just one thing wrong with all of those headlines. Brian Niccol never said anything about a $9 coffee. He said a $9 experience. In fact, here's what he said moments prior during that WSJ interview.
The average spend is a little less than $10, so you're kind of in the $9 to $10 range, and that really depends on whether or not you're attaching food to your drink purchase or how much you're modifying your drink purchase. But it can start with as little as $3 for a traditional cup of coffee, and then obviously you can build your way into all sorts of customized drinks that people love that move that ticket up.
So to reiterate, that $9 experience includes both food and drink. And yet the Wall Street Journal posts a clip with a misleading graphic and completely misrepresents what Brian Niccol actually said. The media is not your friend, folks. And then, deliberately ignoring the context of his answer, media outlets cranked up the outrage machine and blasted out the exact same manufactured narrative.
As CEOs use their increasingly growing power to undermine workers' rights, one of them is defending that $9 latte that you had the other day.
But the $9 Starbucks latte doesn't exist, let alone a $9 cup of coffee. And to prove it, I checked the prices in New York City for numerous latte drinks. A 20-ounce cafe latte costs $5.95. A 20-ounce toasted coconut latte is $6.75. A 20-ounce pistachio latte is $7.25, and a 20-ounce caramel protein latte is $7.65.
And he's asking you to pay for a very special experience in a $9 cup of coffee.
No, he's not, you liar. Look at the banner at the bottom of the screen. Starbucks CEO defends $9 coffee, which again, doesn't exist. They literally typed a fabricated concept into their Chiron and broadcast it to their 10 viewers. He explicitly stated that the average customer spends $9 total, meaning a coffee and a bacon Gouda and egg sandwich. But CNN knows that a graphic saying Starbucks CEO accurately describes cost of breakfast doesn't keep you glued to your television in a state of perpetual class rage. And of course, Starbucks Workers United was happy to jump on board and push that false narrative. But here's the thing. The Starbucks Workers Union should know that $9 coffee doesn't exist. In fact, Starbucks customers know that it doesn't exist. So why keep repeating a blatant lie? Well, because they need that $9 coffee myth to justify their outrage. It's not about telling the truth. It's about farming grievances for the social media algorithm. Now, before you accuse me of being a shill for Starbucks, I want to set the record straight. I'm not a fan of their coffee. In fact, I can't even remember the last time I was in a Starbucks.
Every cup you buy at any Starbucks location directly hurts queer and trans workers.
Ugh. Next, we have Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts stepping up to the microphone to prove that the only thing worse than a journalist doing math is a politician doing math.
Brian Nichols is the CEO of Starbucks. He makes a lot of money.
So the guy's name is Brian Nickel, not Nichols. If you're gonna drag a guy for political purposes, Senator, at least get his name right.
Brian Nichols. Can you tell me how much money does he make, and how does that compare with the workers at Starbucks?
Yeah, so he actually has the highest pay discrepancy between a CEO to the worker, and he makes 6,666 times more than your average barista.
6,666 times! Sounds very specific and slightly demonic. But here's the context. In 2025, the AFL-CIO released their annual Executive Pay Watch report and claimed that Brian Nickel had made nearly $96 million for fiscal year 2024, and that his CEO pay was 6,666 times its median employee's pay, which would mean that the average Starbucks worker makes less than $15,000 a year. And that $15,000 a year number might be shocking until you consider that the Securities and Exchange Commission requires companies like Starbucks to include their entire 400,000 person global workforce into the equation. That means they have to include everyone, regardless of whether they work full-time, part-time, temporary, or just on a seasonal basis. When you throw full-time career employees into the exact same mathematical blender as college students who work part-time, of course the median drops. It's not a sign of corporate tyranny, it's just basic division. And as for Kafia Kate's claim that Brian Nickel makes 6,666 times more than your average barista, well, that's fact-check false. Because when he was initially hired, Nickel was rewarded a compensation package valued at roughly $96 million for his first 4 months, which included a $5 million sign-on bonus and a little over $90 million in stock awards. But that stock number was replacement equity to make up for the tens of millions in unvested stock and cash incentives that he had to forfeit when he quit as the CEO of Chipotle. In other words, he's not making $96 million a year. His base salary is like $1.6 million. Still a lot of money, but it doesn't make for quite as scary of a soundbite.
We are talking about a CEO of a company who made $96 million just last year. $96 million, which is 6,666 times the median Starbucks worker's salary.
There's plenty of money to give 4 months' salary that equals 6,666 times the average Starbucks barista, but there's not enough money to give you a fair contract?
Notice how they both perfectly regurgitate the same exact narrative. It's almost like they aren't actually looking at the corporate filings, they're just blindly reading whatever script that the Starbucks Workers Union gives them.
In modern United States history, Starbucks is the largest violator of federal labor law.
The biggest violator of labor law in modern history. Wow, move over, Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, because the true apex of human labor suffering is a company that didn't let a barista wear a union pin on their apron.
Forcing baristas to write on every single customer's cup under threat of discipline and restricting the dress code does not bring the changes that we need to be successful in our jobs.
Hate to break it to you, but writing a name or a fun message on a cup isn't preventing you from being successful at your job. It is your job.
If you are unable to mark on a cup because you're super busy, tell me what could happen to you as a Starbucks barista.
You can get final written warnings for not following it. I've witnessed my store manager and other store managers just kind of watching and checking the cups on handoff to make sure people are writing on them.
Oh, the humanity. The store manager is actively managing the store? This isn't corporate oppression, it's basic quality control. But sure, call the United Nations stat.
One time, our manager scheduled himself 80 hours of overtime and cut all of our hours from above 30 to below 20. So none of us are making enough hours to sustain our lives.
Wait, your manager scheduled himself 80 hours of overtime, which is a fascinating claim considering Starbucks store managers are salaried employees who don't even qualify for overtime pay.
I've seen people work paycheck to paycheck, work literally like 12 hours a week, barely living.
There is no entry-level retail job on the planet where working 12 hours a week is going to provide you a living wage. If you work 12 hours a week, you don't have a job. You have a hobby that occasionally pays you for your streaming subscriptions.
Sometimes we're really backed up, and it's not fair to us, the workers, and it's not fair to you, the customers, because y'all have to wait so long for your drinks when it's just one person on bar, one person on the register.
Hang on, didn't your union literally tell everyone to go buy their coffee somewhere else because harm to employees or something? But suddenly you're deeply, profoundly concerned that those exact same customers might have to wait an extra 4 minutes for their iced matcha. Pick a lane. Also, having one person taking orders and one person making drinks isn't a labor crisis. That's just called working at a coffee shop. I know it sounds like a brutal, inescapable capitalist dystopia, but to the rest of the world, it's just called having a job. Anyway, that's it for now. Head on over to my super cool merch store at don'twalkrun.shop. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe to the channel, and hope to see you next time. If there is next time.